Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you that also decided to choose to show up today. And I'm grateful again for your trust and for your commitment in attending today or to listen to the recording. My intent is also that in today's session, I'll be conducting this workshop in a trauma-informed manner as well. So to that end, you'll see me doing things a little differently than you might be used to in teleclasses here or elsewhere. You'll notice that I'll spend a lot of time showing you my face, looking you in the eyes, using more analog visual aids as opposed to slides, but there will also be a few slides. There will be opportunities for you to bring your voice into the space if you so choose through both the chat as well as verbally. Okay, so one of our objectives for today also was to talk about what trauma is and to get a little clearer about what that means. So my favorite definition is the shortest, which is simply too much, too fast. Too much stimuli, too much information, too much sensation coming at our bodies too quickly. Another way to think about it is an overwhelming threat that we're not equipped to deal with. So that too much too fast is coming at a rate or a pace or an acuity, a severity that we are simply not equipped to hold or to process. Some of you may be familiar with Gabor Mate, who I think I forgot to mention at the beginning as one of my teachers. And I also love his definition, which clarifies that trauma is not what happens to us, but what happens inside of us as a result of what happened to us. And so what's beautiful to me about all of these definitions is it leaves room for a vast diversity of experiences. So an event or a stimulus or a situation that may be deeply traumatizing to one person might not be traumatizing at all to another, or might be marginally traumatizing to a different person. There's a lot of factors that play into why that is. But the point is that it's not the event, it's not the situation, it's that it's too much too fast and overwhelming beyond the capacity of the person to hold it. It's also really important to clarify that trauma lives in the body. So that's also why I invited you to bring your full bodies to the session today, because trauma and what we've learned in the last several years is that much of trauma lives not in the central nervous system of the brain and the spinal cord, but in the autonomic nervous system outside of those. So while we may have some conscious and cognitive awareness of what's happened to us or not, we can detect and respond to threats without even being consciously aware. Trauma is both acute and chronic. So trauma can be one horrible incident, as you saw in the description of today's teleclass. It can be one horrible incident that occurred to us in the past, or one or two, but it can also be the ongoing chronic pings that our bodies are getting that they don't have an opportunity to fully process or settle. So for example, working in an organization that's toxic or has inhumane expectations, living in a nation that has limited to no safety net, navigating the world in a Black, brown, or female body or trans-identified body, suffering from mental illness or chronic pain. These are things that have the same impact on the nervous system as acute trauma. So I want to normalize that, because whether you've had an incident of acute trauma in the past or not doesn't necessarily mean you or your clients don't have trauma or trauma responses happening in their bodies. The way that we experience trauma or have trauma responses is dependent on both the stressors and resources that we have. So this is a callback to what I just mentioned in the previous slide around how one situation or event can be deeply, minimally, or not traumatic at all to a particular person. So it depends on the stressor, the nature of the stressor, the closeness of the stressor, all of those things, but also on the person's resources. So we have qualities and traits that are genetic, constitutional, and psychological that can provide buffers to a trauma response. We can have behavioral, identity, or social buffers and resources in our family of origin, in our community, in our neighborhood, living conditions, the zip code in which we live, institutions that surround us, policies over history and time, et cetera, et cetera. It goes big and big. So those are also sources of strength for us, or also additional stressors. And finally, normalizing that trauma is widespread and common, even and especially in top organizations and C-suite leaders. So when I bring up the T word in that type of an environment and oftentimes get the, oh, that's not us, or we don't have that, that in itself is a trauma response. Some of the most deeply traumatized people I know are in leadership positions in these organizations. So especially navigating deep economic and social change in our country and beyond, in the United States and beyond, going through a global pandemic, these are all traumatizing. So our nervous systems are beautifully designed like a trampoline that our bodies can send us immediately outside of our awareness and permission based on the information it's receiving from the environment, which it's matching against our past and what else is programmed into our bodies, can instantly boing us straight up to the second floor or the third floor of the house of stress, depending on how serious it is. However, what's really important to know, folks, is that you can't jump out the third floor window of the house of stress down to the ground floor. You will break your bones and maybe die. When the nervous system can send us into any of these states instantaneously, but we cannot go right from freeze to social nervous system. We have to go through activation. We have to take the stairs down. And this is what it means to down-regulate. So down-regulating, which is what we did when we did the orienting tool, calming and settling, that's going from the second floor to the first floor, or from the third floor to the second floor, or taking one stair down, okay? This is very important for us to know about ourselves, about our clients, and if you do any group work with teams or with organizations as well. Because what can happen, we are designed to go into these states for just brief moments and then come out. But because we don't generally get to activate our muscles to fight or flee, and when we are frozen, we often don't know when the threat has passed, especially when the threat is a virus that we can't see or something we can't escape, then we can live here for hours, days, weeks, months, years. So when we start to come out of a freeze state and our nervous systems start to thaw, all hell can break loose. We go into activation. So people can start to feel like they're getting worse, or they're escalating, or they're going crazy, because as we come out of freeze, we start to go into fight, flight, and all of what that means. You will see this on teams as well. If a toxic leader is removed, or the threat of layoffs, goes away, you may notice that that's when a lot of conflict breaks out. It doesn't mean things are escalating. It means people are starting to thaw out and come back to baseline. You're seeing this in organizations now. A lot of my HR colleagues are saying that they're seeing complaints and bad behavior and discrimination in the workplace now like they haven't seen in years. Makes complete sense from a trauma perspective because people are coming out of freeze. So that doesn't mean that we ignore the quote unquote bad behaviors, but that we can sort of normalize that and help facilitate that processing for folks from this trauma lens, because it is a necessary step to get back to social nervous system and to being settled, spacious, and connected. Or another tools. This is your second tool for today, and how to regulate your nervous system, which, folks, is the number one gift we can give anybody else, is a regulated nervous system. And that's not to say that you should be regulated all the time. Activated and frozen states are adaptive. When we are experiencing threat, they're not bad. And so how can we have choice and agency to settle when we're ready and when that would work for us?